Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 118. I am delighted today to be joined by the sports scientist of the Belgian FA, Arne Jaspers. Arne, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much. Yeah, also, my name was spoken out very, very well, Arne.
So I've been practicing all week
yeah.
on our call. I've been practicing. I was trying to roll the R, but it wasn't happening.
It's almost, you wouldn't notice if you.
Well, at least I didn't go Arne.
Yeah, indeed. That's in for English-speaking people. That's the I heard most that way, but everything is good. So happy to be on the show. Thank you.
No, it's great to have you on, and obviously we've had one of your fellow, one of your peers, one of your other colleagues at the Belgian FA, Richard Evans, has also been on the podcast before. And I know a former colleague in Matt Jones as well that have all spoke very highly about yourself. So I appreciate the recommendations from the lads. And I'm really excited to sort of dive into some of the topics that we're going to cover today. So thank you for giving up your time.
Great. Thank you. Looking forward. Yeah.
And then let's go back. Let's hear about your career, because I know we spoke on the phone the other day about some of the clubs you've been at, some of the experiences. But do you want to, if people don't know about your journey, do you want to sort of take us back and take us up to current day?
Yeah, definitely. So I started doing my studies in movement sciences at the University of Leuven in Belgium. And did a master's there with specialization in triathlon. So not yet in still had some things to do before going into football. But my main, I did play football, but then I got into triathlon, which was very interesting. I think also from an exercise physiology point of view. Started working with some preliminary data. So starting looking to Excel, tracking and monitoring your own training sessions, which in the end is very good exercise, I think, for getting into the monitoring. After that, actually in movement sciences, we learned a lot about load monitoring, but I also want to know a little bit more about injuries and things like that. So decided to do at the same university a master in physiotherapy and rehabilitation sciences. Yeah, you could do kind of a shortened version if you have done movement sciences before. So that was interesting. Also, of course, you still want to be a student for not forever, but at that time for a couple of more years. So that was a good decision. Now, during this studies, I noticed that I didn't really want to become like a real physiotherapy with the manual practices, things like that was not really my thing, but it was okay. In the end, you learn a lot about injuries. So and it was due to an internship that I got into the Netherlands at the football club AZ Alkmaar over there. And that back then, they started doing or they started working with the GPS from Catapult. So back in the years, I think it's a lot, I don't know, but almost 6 or 7 years ago. So the very early years, which was interesting and really interested me because it was a whole new area to discover. And I also back there noticed that from the triathlon and playing around with the Excel was quite handy doing that. So they were happy, and then they asked to do that and stay there. And that was where I tried to combine to the PhD. So a PhD at the University of Leuven that focused on very broadly load monitoring in professional football and how you could use GPS. What were the indicators? How could you use them? So start doing the PhD in combination with the work at AZ Alkmaar for a couple of years. Then at the same time, I was involved with the national team of Saudi Arabia with the coach Bertrand Marek. And then at the end, my PhD finished in Leuven and also my work at AZ Alkmaar. And that was when I got into 2018 into the Belgian national team at the federation to help Richard also with the preparation of the World Cup, which was we did have a good result. Could have been better, but
Great
It's nice
result. Great
result.
result. Yeah.
Yeah, nice result in the end. Then a very brief, how to say, step out to the United Arab Emirates, because it's Van Marwijk got the coach there, and yeah, got a very good relationship with him. But that adventure ended quite a little bit sooner than expected. So, and then I got back to the Belgium National Federation. That's where I am. Next to that, yeah, I'm working a little bit as an external consultant for the football club in Belgium, Leuven, also the first division, and also that's another sport, but the kayaking canoe federation.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
also a little bit the monitoring practices. So that's a little bit more back into the individual sports and back to the triathlon exercise physiology monitoring. Also with GPS to track the races and see the race profile. So yeah, probably I like a lot of things, and I think a lot of things are interesting. That's maybe also yeah, you can see it from my description. Yeah.
I always like speaking to coaches that have either previously worked in other sports or currently work in other sports as well, because it's always nice to discuss like lessons learned from the sports, because obviously the cultures can be very different from sport to sport. So is there anything that sort of stands out from obviously triathlon and the sports that you're currently involved in that maybe have related over to football, or you think may relate in the future possibly as well?
Mm-hmm. I think for example for triathlon, yeah, in these individual sports, every second or every centimeter or whatsoever counts. So these athletes are very aware of their body, probably a little bit more than most of the football players. So they're really yeah, and also probably they know a little bit more about their body without, yeah, this is now very black and white. It's not for everyone like this, but
Yeah.
they know their body very well because they also in terms of nutrition, also they probably are a little bit more into monitoring themselves as well, which helps them to yeah, to know and yeah, they're very aware of themselves. That's probably a little bit more than football. On the other hand, and that's the challenging part in football. Of course, it's a team sport, and in individual sports, it's all about the performance and probably the kind of the best win at that moment. But that's not always the case in football, as you can have a very good team. But that's also challenging. But the nice thing about football, it's there are a lot more factors involved, and yeah, it's interesting from both points of view. Also in probably in football, it's while in, for example, in cycling, the chance to get an injury, yeah, except if you have a bad crash or something, it's a little bit less than in football, where the challenges on the body are different, but also a big challenge, especially with the injuries, because the movement pattern, it's eccentric, while in cycling, for example, it's concentric and very yeah, in the same way. So probably in the team sports, you have to manage a little bit more things, which makes it challenging, because also at this point we cannot manage everything yet, and that has to do with the things we can measure, things that we can measure in the right way. So but I think especially if maybe in terms of nutrition and sleep, there are a lot of things also we in individual sports we can still transfer a little bit more or educate a little bit more in football. But that's yeah, not for everyone, but that's it's a little a general feeling.
No, it's interesting because we spoke a lot about managing the individual within the team environment, because that's what we have to do more and more now, isn't it? That yes, we are working with a team, a group of players, but we've got 16, 20, 24, 30 individuals within that squad. So it's really interesting actually, comparing individual sports to team sports and seeing what we can take and learn
Yeah.
from them as well.
Yeah. Yes, indeed, because I think, yeah, with as you say, we have like 20 or 30 individuals in one team, and in the end, you want to individualize training. That's correct, and as good as possible. But on the other hand, it's kind of cost benefit, because it's a team sport, and you want to train as a team as much as possible. So yeah, probably there is a perfect schedule for each individual player. But if you have to do that, then just training in maybe 4, 5, 6 different groups at the same time. So you still, yeah, it's kind of a balance you have to, and maybe one training because you want to do it as a team could mean that for one player it's gonna be a little bit too much, and maybe a hypothetical higher injuries, but at the same time you have to train as a team, and yeah, you want to that team tactical principles, you want to have these right. So yeah, maybe just hypothetical, but 1 or 3 or 4% of higher injury risk for one player could mean that it's a 10 or 20% better performance on the team tactical part. So in the end, yeah, we don't know the exact numbers, but you have to kind of balance. I've tried to balance this. And that's a challenge as well. I'm probably also, I think that's quite clear. There are various ways to roam in regarding this matter. So probably, yeah, there is probably one, yeah, the best decision will be out there. But yeah, at this moment, with the things we can measure, things we cannot measure, we just don't know it yet at this moment. So I think, yeah, as practitioners, we all aim to kind of get to that perfect decision as much as possible. But yeah, that's that's in maybe in 5 or 10 years we can do that. But on the other hand, and that's just a thought, then we're maybe, yeah, this just you put in the numbers, you have the perfect decision, but then also the fun of trying and to think about the perfect decision, and then the rationale behind it, it's, yeah, all that fun is gone. So then you're maybe just trying robots. So it's just some loud out thoughts, but it's, yeah, it still stays a challenge, but at the same time, that's also, it's nice to have these challenges.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing I was going to ask you about was, with your experiences, the differences between being at a club, so working at a club day in, day out, and being with the national team, where you'll only get the players so many times per year for a certain amount of time, for a certain amount of games. So apart from the obvious, like what in your role, what do you feel some of the main differences are?
I think, yeah, that's a very good question. I think, yeah, from a club, you're day in, day out, you're with the team, and you know each player perfect in a perfect way, and you know what you have done yesterday, the day before, so many weeks, and I knew when I was at AZ, and we had some players going to international camps with their countries. It was interesting because for us, yeah, we were thinking about, do we have to give our GPSs to these guys and back in the days, and to measure at the national team, because then it wasn't, yeah, used a lot yet. Definitely not at every national team. So, but then you were like, yeah, are we going to give these expensive units to the players? And then not every player was that that focused on the GPS units. So I was like, no, we're not gonna do that. But at least we're gonna try to have a daily communication with the player in terms of, yeah, how hard was your training session or game, and how long do you have an indication of how long you did train, so that you already have kind of something to fill up the gap, because yeah, it's kind of a gap in information when they go to the national team, and already back then you already could see from club level there was a big difference as in preparations of the yeah, all the different national teams. So that was interesting from a club point of view. And then yeah, you kind of a standard protocol when they came in at the back at the club to do, but maybe yeah, some players could already train. So that's yeah, I think there, yeah, at that time definitely there was some percentages to win. And then yeah, on the other side, it's from national team. You don't, yeah, you have a very how do you say, diffuse, or yeah, a variation in the players coming in. Some players do play a lot with their team, have European competitions. A lot of players. There are also some players who are maybe, yeah, the bench players, but they're still important for the national team. You have players who come back from injury. So it's you have a, and that's the thing we always try to do at the national team, is try to make, yeah, based upon we try to ask as much information from the clubs, because you want to kind of know what did happen before, because in compared to the club with with the national team, it's a very big gap, or at least you want to fill that gap and communicate a lot with the clubs, and try to ask all the GPS data. Of course, there are different systems, so it's not compare them one to one. So yeah, you can already hear a lot of challenges, but in the end, we try to get it's probably a guesstimation, a guess and an estimation of what the status of the player is at that moment, taking into account every information that you could collect. So also, I think it's an easy one, but for us, it's a good one. Is just match playing times, and see, are they playing their matches regularly? Of course, one every week, or maybe sometimes two every week. And then, these players, they train regularly, they're recovering, they play their matches, so probably they will be fine. Of course, you have to take into account the congested schedule. So if they play, especially now also with the COVID period, it's challenging. But if they played a lot, you want to take that into account. Yeah, but most of the time, also the players who play a lot are important for your team. So you have to find a kind of a balance, which you try as good as possible. But then also, and that's a more challenging one, is the players who are not playing with the club, because you don't know, are they doing top-up sessions or not? You try to get it from data, or sometimes you don't have data to communicate with the players. So we try to guesstimate a little bit, what would be the best preparation for them. So that's for us an important one. And of course, if they come in at a team, especially in Europe with qualifications, so there you have so little time. They come in at the national team with match day +1, match day +2. So and your match day +2 is then already a match day -2, or in the best case -3. So you want to do team tactical, but probably it's always as a sport science has to say, it's always, how to say, it's the brake. You have to put put on the brake, because actually they're still recovering, so you can't do too much. So you're kind of trying to taper. So it's difficult, it's challenging, and then it feels a little bit like you're in the Europa League weeks with your with a club team, where you can't do too much. It's mainly about recovering, but you try to do some things and do something tactical drills, while not adding too much additional load to reduce the injury risk. So challenging. And then, of course, you have done for example, for preparation in the World Cup, then you have a different scenario where you can indeed periodize a little bit more in terms of we're going to add some to improve the physical fitness. But also over there could have been a long season for a couple of players with Champions League finals and these things. So also over there, you have to make these groups, the players who maybe need to regain some freshness, the other ones who we really focus on regaining fitness. So we always it's an interesting puzzle. While for example, at the club level, if they come in at your club, you kind of, for the most of them, you start at the same level, and you can go into preseason and really have a very good general group approach. So that's even very brief. the challenge that came up in my mind.
It's really interesting, and I suppose it ties into what we were talking about before with managing the individual, because it's probably even more apparent in the national or international environment, isn't it? Because you're having to look at every single player situation, minutes played, like what's been going on, are the clubs winning, are the clubs losing? Like, obviously there's the psychological effect of all that as well. What I was going to ask is, would you say then that the majority of your not the majority of your work, but a lot of your focus is actually when the players are with the clubs, because you're having to monitor everything that they're doing, and it's obviously the majority of the time. Then they come to you for a short period of time and go back to the club. So is the majority of your work based on seeing what's happening day to day at the clubs?
Yeah, definitely. So what we ask the days before we start the camp is we ask all clubs to get a data as much information as possible to, yeah, it's a kind of a, how to say, a barometer, like to to see what's going on and what has a player been doing, and yeah, you try to collect as much information as possible to make a kind of a profile, and of course in between you follow up the match exposure. You see if was there an injury or not. You have a kind of a book of every player to see,
Yeah.
what is he at, what did he do before. Yeah, also a lot of these players have been with us for a couple of years now. So you have his blueprint, and yeah, you know more and more about his career and how he's the more he gets at the national team. So it's indeed in between. It's just as getting as much information as possible and try to connect the dots. Also, yeah, knowing from, for example, injury point of view that a lot of things are involved. So you just try to, yeah, like I said, to fill the gap or the gap in information as much as possible, and yeah, also in that report that to Richard then to see, yeah, what's the state of each player, and do we have to take something into account? Do we, yeah, are we going to do a little bit more or less, or just, yeah, going into the training sessions with them like that? And then that's indeed a big part. And then you have the daily training sessions where you're monitoring live, but that's mostly that's just about, yeah, seeing that they're not doing too much. So especially in that's for, if I compare it, for example, to the UAE or the Saudi Arabia national team, where there we did have a lot more days. So because they, yeah, most of players were playing the country. So which was great, because also to support the national team, they could arrange the schedule of the competition with the national team. So you could have like 7 or 8 days of preparation. So that's an all, yeah, totally different approach, because there indeed you could integrate some sessions where you're focusing on improving the physical fitness a little bit more. So you have a lot more, yeah, possibilities to paradise. So that's also, yeah, in terms of the Asia Federation, or yeah, the AFC compared to the UEFA, it's a totally different approach. But also then over there you have to travel, and
Yeah.
I think in Europe you have maybe, yeah, 2 days between consecutive games, while there it's five days, because you also have to travel from Saudi or Dubai to Japan or Australia. So also, yeah, jet lag kicks in, and yeah, a lot of different things. So it's interesting, but in the preparation you have a lot more time and possibilities to paradise over there. Yeah.
I was going to say I could sort of feel all the jealousy from all the practitioners working in Europe with all these European nations about having extra time with like the Saudi national team, but then there's obviously the travel that comes into it that we don't have so much. So it balances out a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. But these are interesting experiences for sure. But it's also nice to see, also in terms of culture, these things, the differences, and that, yeah, they also learn me that you cannot control everything. So that's probably in the beginning of my PhD, it was, yeah, we're gonna measure everything and we will be able to. That was very naive back then. You were maybe 23, 24 years old, and then you want to, yeah, I'm gonna predict injuries and you're gonna solve everything. And the very start of PhD, and 1 year later, you're like, oh no, don't know everything. It's not gonna happen. So but it's good to be naive, and it's and then gradually you start to learn, and I think that's yeah, while in the beginning it was all about the data and very objective, and then you start to learn a lot also with these experiences, which was actually was great to learn, because you learn a lot at the university, but then you also know and I really believe in evidence-based practice, but also I think the practice-based evidence,
Yeah.
to say something, that's an important thing as well, and to learn over the years from other fitness coaches, from head coaches, from these cultures, and you see, yeah, then also at a given moment you just aim, yeah, I want to measure as good as possible and do the things I can measure in the best way possible. Also take into account and yeah, take for granted that some things you cannot control, and you just yeah have to live with that, and that's that's it. But in the end, that's okay, and maybe we will be able to measure more and more, and that will help. But of course, there are going to be always things that you can't control, and yeah, just try the things that you can control to control these and the other things. Yeah, that's okay.
And let's dive into some of that now,
Yeah.
because you mentioned briefly your PhD. So load indicators used in daily practice, obviously a big part of that. And obviously that regardless of who people are working with, what sort of level, we're all going to be monitoring load in some way, shape or form, or using some sort of tech or not. So I think it's really interesting to dive into some of your research and some of the findings from the research just initially on that as well. So do you want to just break that down for us and go into a little bit of information on that for us?
Yes. So first with the PhD, start with a systematic review. So at that time, I know when I just begin myself in practice with the GPS, yeah, we can measure a lot, and there are a lot of things, and how actually can we use this? Because I was in the beginning, if I look back at AZ, we were very happy with, oh yeah, look, we can measure what to do on the pitch, and then they did run 5K and did some sprints and acceleration, and then in the beginning it's very nice, but it's also good, and that's the important first step. And I was like, yeah, but actually we're just describing the training, but yeah, in the end it's about, yeah, you want to reduce injury risk, or you want to get them fitter and get insights what they are doing in the match, and how can we use these insights to make the players better. So that was kind of the start for my PhD even of how we're gonna connect these load indicators to certain aspects of physical fitness or injury risk. So yeah, start with then a systematic review that at that time. So it was 2016, and then actually there wasn't too much information yet about or studies, and now that has improved a lot. But at that time, how are we going to connect these load indicators to physical fitness or injury risk, and how can we use these insights? So that was the first the first step, and from there on, we monitored the team, and then looked into load and injury risk, load and well-being of the players. Also, first I think I was with James Malone and Matthew Vardy. Also, first in can we measure what the goalkeepers are doing? How does this relate to the well-being of the goalkeeper? Also, very interesting one, because I think that's important as well. Is there's so many manufacturers around and different GPS systems, and you have a lot of different settings within the same GPS system. So also, and I think it was nice to as well to be aware of the fact if you change your settings or a different software, it can totally mess up your numbers, and in the end you want to start with valid and reliable data, which is an important point. So if you're already going to change that, then what happens next is actually not not worth anything anymore. So that was and I think it's good that there are different manufacturers, because the competition drives things forward. But sometimes I think we talk about big data, and also was very naive in the beginning, and we'll have big data in football, but actually we don't have big data. Big data is like Google in terms of millions and billions billion data points, while we did some machine learning, which was 5,000 data points of players, and so that actually I also, but I think that's a good thing. But at the end of the PhD, you're like, maybe I could have done a lot of things much better. But also, probably that's also part of the PhD process and journey to be able to look back in a critical way on the things you did before. Also, I think we did a study about load monitoring and injury risk, and at that time, looking to cumulative load for a couple of load indicators, and then of course also the acute chronic work ratio, because that at that time with the things we knew at that time, it was it looked good. And then now you look back and also with the evidence coming up that there are some shortcomings. Actually it's good that these like science built upon each other, and that's the way to move forward. But then looking back, you were like, maybe we could have done it in a different way, and but it's also science, and that's how we move I think forward together. And it's good that there's criticism, and that's how you can and some of these things are still useful, and some of these things at that time were useful, and then sometimes you have to say, okay, maybe we were not perfect, or we were wrong somehow, and you have to accept that, and but that's also how you improve your own monitoring practices. So that's and I'm looking forward to all things that will appear in the next few years, because that's all these things you can apply as well. So that's actually at that if I look back, your PhD at that time is kind of a snapshot of what's there at that time, and you have to be realistic that some of these things will be at that time were good with the knowledge at that time that you knew. But you have to I'm honest. So and when science evolves, you also have to admit that maybe sometimes looking back sometimes are wrong, but at that time it was the best you did, which in not in honest way. So but it teaches you to be I'd say modest, and try to implement these things. Also, you learn a lot of, for example, machine learning techniques yourself, and how can these be used, and how also can these be not used. So it was a very nice journey. If I look back,
it's a really important process, isn't it? And this is how, like you mentioned, this is how, as whether you want to call it an industry or within our roles, this is how we are going to improve, is by doing things and then questioning. Like you said before, monitoring for the sake of monitoring doesn't really do anything. But if we do analyze it and go into why we do certain things that we do, then that's the important thing, and that's how we're going to take the steps forward, isn't it? And the other thing, when I was doing some research on the podcast, I watched your webinar with StatSport. And I know in that you've talked about monitoring the training process and breaking it down into 4 sections. So for people that haven't watched it, I do recommend that you go and watch that webinar, because it is very, very good. It's a great top webinar available on YouTube, I think. And you talk about the four blocks, I suppose, of descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. But one area I was going to point out and maybe get you to touch on is the predictive way of using data. So in terms of like what will happen, so us trying to use the data that we've collected to say, we predict that this is going to happen. Because I think that's probably the exciting bit, I suppose, isn't it?
It's all, it started my PhD back then very naive, and you're gonna predict the injuries just based upon the GPS, but then you start to know, it's a lot more out there, and you have to be modest, and there are also some things you can't predict. But I think it's a very interesting part where and it can certainly help us also nowadays with more and more technologies coming up, and then the AI, machine learning, how you want to name it. There are some possibilities there, but also we have to be. And I always think back of, I think, Minority Report, the movie with Tom Cruise. I think it's almost 20 years old or something now, but it's very.
I've seen that.
It's a must watch, definitely, from Steven Spielberg.
Okay.
It's and they can predict murder already before the suspect is going to do yeah, the killing. So and then
Right.
so it's yeah, and then I'm not gonna not gonna compare it, but maybe in 5-10 years you will. But and I want to be sure we're far from there yet. And I think nowadays there are some yeah, some studies and starting to do some things in that way. And I think that that's a good first start, but also, yeah, we have to be realistic. Yeah, at this time, and I think it's the Bittencourt paper about the dynamic and complex system approach. There's so many things involved in an injury, and yeah, at this point we do not measure everything yet, and yeah, we don't know how they interact with each other. So, but yeah, that's something we have to take into account. And then the other thing is yeah, like I said, big data. Yeah, Google and then Amazon, they they have the really big data. But for us, there's still a lot of shortcomings. But it should be our goal to be yeah, and we know where to go, and the first steps are made, and there are some shortcomings, and yeah, it's like science building upon each other, and some things are wrong and some things are good, and that's how we make progress. But in the end, yeah, it's I think that's a yeah, that's the next step, and that can really help us, because that's, as practitioners, what we want to do. And that's yeah, that's then the final step is the prescription part. And I always yeah, had some discussions with colleagues as well, as the predictive, we're gonna predict what is going to happen, and then with the prescriptive part of all these things, we want to yeah, what's the best session at that time, because yeah, we will probably be able to predict something. But for example, with that session, if you do that session, you will be able to gain 3% in fitness, but you have 10% of injury risk. And with that particular session, you will have 1% of fitness improvements, but maybe just 2% of injury risk. And I think with prescription, we will be able to compare all these different things, and yeah, determine the perfect training sessions for that person at that time. And I think that's good to yeah, to consider. Is we do a lot of training prescription, but and I think myself at the beginning I did wrong, because I also say the prescriptive part, but if you look prescriptive from the right point of view, actually that's the last step, and that's when we are able to really determine the perfect session at that time. But that's then predictive part, and I think that's where we made some first steps. But yeah, I'm looking forward to new technologies coming in, also new analysis methods, because that will help us go forward. But yeah, still we still have to yeah to consider the limitations and possible pitfalls, because also I think there in terms of perfectly predicting sometimes, and also I think as a company you want to say that it's nice tagline, but still there, if yeah, if you look back at the complex system approach, yeah, there's so many things involved in an injury in an athlete, and that's, I think, as practitioners, maybe the main point of that is, yeah, if you consider that complex system, I think it's always good to take that, yeah, to consider that, and to think about that when you prescribe a training, because somehow if you analyze all these different things, you can make a kind of a guesstimation what's the best approach. And as I said before, also yeah, take into account and live with the fact that some things you cannot control, but yeah, you try to do it as good as possible. And I think also with the predictive part, with making these steps, we will, and something I also said in the presentations, you will be able to get to the perfect decision more and more, while you would purely do it on your feeling. The possibility of making a big mistake is probably much bigger than if you combine your feeling together with objective data, because that way you kind of close down the confidence interval of a good decision. While I'm not saying that, and that's something I learned as well from coaches, and I have to thank Van Marwijk for that, is he had a very good feeling, because sometimes I was monitoring next to the field, and we were going above the thresholds we spoke before for training, and I was walking on the field, and he already said, yeah, I was going to quit because I could feel that we're doing a lot. So that was, I think that this is great how you can combine expert knowledge and together with data. And I think that's how we can move forward, because yeah, really predicting and prescripting everything based on data, far from there yet. And then also probably that takes the nice challenge away. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually something I was going to bring up as well. You've just sort of read my mind on that bit, because I was going to talk about like integration between staff as well, which is something that obviously you've touched on there, is because it isn't just a decision from yourself, is it? There's other coaches involved, obviously Richard, who we've had on the podcast, but a lot of other practitioners, right up to the head coach or the manager as well. So what are some of your views on when, like, the importance of the integration between staff, but why it's worked so effectively? Because to have the finish that you guys had in the previous tournament, there obviously has to be some integration there between the staff for you to achieve that success. So I suppose, what would your advice be for practitioners that are working at a club or even with international sides as well, on creating that integration and having it work well amongst their staff?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Well, yeah, I think in an open communication, but probably everyone knows it, is very important. And from my point of view, I see my role as someone behind the screens, and that's also what I like. And I try to support everyone with the data information, what they need, and try to take that into account, and also communicate that back. So I see my role purely as someone to support all the others to take the decisions. I think if you have, like I said, all this information, you give this information and try to support their decisions. But also, in the end, it's about communication. If there are some complaints, it's important that it's communicative. If I know that, I can look at it during training sessions. So I try to give a lot of my information, ask for information in return. And then if you have all that, you can consider, I take that into account as important or not. And that's how you try to then also communicate to Richard. And then also in the end, sometimes you make some advice or some the guesstimation, because I try to not use prescription because we're far from there, but you give some advice, or try to give regarding players or something to take into account of something that popped up that you think that's important to consider. But also, and that's something I've had to learn as well throughout my career. Sometimes it's possible that a coach doesn't take that into account, for example, because he knows, apologize, but I'm going to do that 11 versus 11 for 10 minutes more, because I really want to train on that team tackle principle. And maybe the hypothetical injury risk can increase with that, and maybe they're just 1% less prepared for the game in 2 days or tomorrow. But then from team tackle point of view, that could gain us 20% or something. So that's also something you have to consider and just agree with that, because and that's a choice the coach make, which is perfectly fine. So I'm not gonna discuss that, but as long as you, I think, as a medical staff and physical staff, our goal is to communicate also with nutrition, is to communicate as good as possible and try to do everything for the players and to deliver them in a perfect state to the coach, and then he can make a decision. And sometimes he will follow your advice and sometimes not. But I think that's okay, as long as you just try to do it as good as possible. I think that's important. But probably also not no secret formula over there, but just communicating as good as possible. Try to leave aside the egos, just communicate, and in the end it's about the players. So and that, I think that's the most important. It's about the players, and you just have to try to do your job as good as possible, and possible, and communicate, give information to everyone who needs it, and then also trust that the head coach will make the perfect decision, or the perfect decision at that time. And sometimes it can be wrong, but that could also be, yeah, that's it, and you have to learn from that, and yeah, you evolve.
I actually think that's a brilliant point that you just made there on the head coach, maybe bringing that into consideration in a session, because that's real life, isn't it? That's what will happen. The final thing I was going to ask before we go into some quick fire questions, just on that point, is to just get your perspective on what do you think your reaction would have been in that situation, them extending that match for maybe 10 minutes or whatever change they're going to make at the start of your career to where you are now, like where you've come out of like the education side of things, where you see things as being like, this is what we're trying to do. And you said it before, like, I'm going to impact everything, I'm going to control everything. So obviously with your added experience now, do you think there'd have been a big difference between how you react to that?
That's a really nice, actually, it's a really nice, a good question. I think in the beginning I would be maybe a little bit angry because not following the advice back then, and you were like, yeah, I'm gonna predict everything and you have to follow this. And then gradually, yeah, seeing that oh wow, yeah, there's more behind an injury. So it's not that this is going automatically lead to an injury. So and also, yeah, seeing the bigger picture, while indeed from triathlon, it's a lot about the physical abilities and the physical fitness, but yeah, also the mental part. While in football, the team tactile and technical part is a big thing of that as well. So also seeing, yeah, it's not only about about the load. So try to be realistic about that, and just I think at that time, and that's still a little bit. If there's an injury, as a sports scientist, you feel, especially me, you feel responsible. But in the end, yeah, you have actually also, yeah, sometimes there could have been injury, and you feel responsible. But hey, probably you've done your job. You've said be a little bit careful about this player, but it's also, yeah, not all the time this injury is going to happen. So yeah, as you know, so many things are involved, and maybe, yeah, some things you haven't seen, or that case, actually, yeah, each injury is new case, and you learn from that, and you try to do it as good as possible. But you also have to, I think, and that's something I've learned now, yes, sometimes you just can't predict things because you didn't know everything, or you didn't know how, yeah, these factors were involved. So sometimes an injury can also pop up, and then that's something I'll also, now I can live with that much more, is just knowing that, yeah, you can't predict everything. So you can live with that as well. And also, yeah, as you see there, and that's also toward the head coach, there's so many different approaches possible, especially if you see all the papers about the preparation toward game from different teams. Also players are different, and yeah, probably for one player, yes, much more, yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, you can the errors, for example, that you make in the training load or whatsoever, are for him are, yeah, you have a much bigger range than for other players, where the range of making a bad decision is much smaller, so he can get injured just faster. So it's about, yeah, I'm saying a lot of things, so I'm just missing out what I want to say a little bit. But it's about, yeah, I think I'm much more, I accept it a lot more, that sometimes these bad things can happen, and just if you've done everything that you knew, and information that you had, and you provided to the people responsible for that, and then they did make a decision, yeah, you just have to live with that. And most of the time these decisions are perfect. Maybe sometimes we did train too hard and then there was an injury, but hey, you did your job, you provide information, and also, you know, it's maybe also a little bit of bad luck involved at that moment, that the player was in a certain situation that could cause the injury. So yeah, it's I think I would accept a lot more now than back in the days when I was naive.
I did think you would say that. I did think you would say that, but I thought it'd be really interesting just to get your views on that with your experiences. But no, I think that was a great way of just wrapping that section up, and we'll move on to some of the quick fire questions that I've got on the end of the podcast. So the first one being, who are some of the biggest influences on your career so far? And I know it's hard for a lot of coaches to narrow this down to maybe a few people, but maybe some of the standouts for you.
I think. Yeah, I always think you. It's a quick fire, so I'll try to make it as short as possible.
Doesn't have to be too quick.
But I think you can learn from everyone. That's my philosophy. So that's biggest influences. I think I got influence from everyone throughout my career. So I think it's like also on conferences on everywhere. It's interesting to discuss with people and learn from them. So I actually everyone is kind of an influence, which is great. But you also have to be grateful for example, from I think Van Marwijk, but also Martinez, but especially for Van Marwijk, I learned a lot about the practice-based evidence and how important the knowledge, the expert knowledge is, the experience next to all the objective measures. So that's of course also from Roberto, how he approaches games, but also in terms of managing a team relation and his how to say being friendly to everyone and how he approaches everyone. Also fitness coaches. You mentioned Richard already. I have to also I think Niels and Kok and then Robert de Groot at Alkmaar were some also because with them I really closely collaborate together for regarding the GPS and together with them asking good questions, me looking into the data. That's how I developed myself also a lot. So I really believe in a close correlation with either the physical coach, fitness coach, or whatever, and together with then the sports scientist or data analyst and together brainstorming, asking the right questions. So these guys also with Rule at the Saudi and UAE team. He had a very nice balance between, on the one hand, being evidence-based, but also sometimes you in practice you already found things that a couple of years after will be found in research. So he was also a very a big influence on that. And then in terms of research, I think I started with the triathlon, the Bannister and the fitness fatigue model was a very big start in the monitoring. Then nowadays Aaron Kutz and his papers, how he approaches things. I think the thinking fast and slow thing was very, because it's kind of you think about these things and it's in your head, and then you see this paper and it's like, oh wow, this nicely summarized and this is perfect, and they're like, oh, this is for it's a kind of relief or something when you read this and Franco Impellizzeri, I think Martin Buchheit with because he's also, I think I like it's somewhere in between evidence-based practice and the practice-based evidence with the SCI, the performance science reports are a very nice platform. So I think probably these are kind of the guys who pop in my mind where I learn a lot or get a lot of ideas from. So that's
real. And then the next one, what would you say your biggest strength is as a practitioner?
I think we touched already is take into account that you cannot know everything, but try to measure and inform yourself as good as possible and take these things into account and know from research that they have an influence on each other. So the complex system approach and And based upon that, I'm not saying that in my mind there's, yeah, actually maybe there in every one of us, we're doing some machine learning and you try to detect patterns. And I think that's what I try to do. And sometimes, yeah, I'm objective, but sometimes, yeah, you know, from your experience that not everything you can point that it's, yeah, sometimes it's a feeling, but then you notice throughout the years that this feeling can be a lot of times can be right. So I try to follow my both my feeling combined with the data and yeah, considering that we don't know everything, but based on that, try to make as good as possible your decisions. And then I always see myself as in a supportive role. So I really, yeah, it's maybe too honest, but I don't really like to make the final decision, but I like to be in a supportive role. And I think maybe as a sport scientist in a federation or an analyst, I think it's also maybe, yeah, a good characteristic to have, because given, yeah, I don't want to be the end decision maker, but you try to help to make these decisions as good as possible. And that's also what I really like. And I think that's maybe one of my strengths.
Brill. And then the next one, I know you've got a number of books there behind you on the bookshelf, but I was going to ask about...
Yeah, just to look intelligent.
So there might not be any of these, but in terms of CPD, in terms of maybe webinars, podcasts, might be certain bits of research, is there anything that sort of stands out as being something that has been really applicable for you recently? Is there something in particular?
What I, yeah, and actually, yeah, there are a lot of bad things about COVID, but maybe you have to thank COVID for all the nice webinars these years, and it's nice to see these initiatives. So yeah, there were a lot of things, and as I said in the beginning, I think I really like to learn from everyone, and I'm really convinced we can learn from everyone. So yeah, there was a lot of good things around. So I think I learned a lot of this year. So this whole year was a kind of a CPD. So maybe it's difficult to pinpoint out one particular thing, but I think in the very beginning when Steve Barrett started with that was actually maybe the first big webinar conference, which was great. A lot of nice idea, and then throughout, yeah. Jaspers, all these practitioners coming up and wanting to share their experiences and insights. Yeah, I think it's great, and learned from that a lot. And also, and nowadays I'm a lot. I'm doing a lot in Power BI, and I think these. I forgot their names, and I'm really grateful for them. But putting it on YouTube and being able to learn from that. So I'm really, yeah, I have to look up their names, but two guys are really follow and like with the Power BI applied to sports, which is I think I learned a lot from it myself, and I would recommend it to everyone who's in analytics a little bit. Also for students, it's it could be a really nice course at that university, and it's just available for that. So I really have to thank these guys, because it's very nice and to learn, and it also helps yourself to evolve. And then yeah, so many like your biggest influences. There are so many things around, and you just have to be thank all these people supporting that and make it possible.
And then the final ones, I'm going to blend these into the same questions, but for two different people. So what do you think some of the most important characteristics are for a coach or a practitioner? So that could be a sports scientist, an S&C coach, or any sort of coach, but then also a player as well. I think it's nice to get the perspective on both sides. So something that obviously a characteristic you think is most important for us to be successful.
Mm-hmm. I think being understandable or try to empathic, like you say, to and to see, because yeah, that's we're all different characters, and probably if I would have the characteristics of a player, I was not doing the podcast and playing in the Premier League or so. But it's try to, yeah, to be empathic and to see your role also from the other person, and try to support them and understand them, and also I think for me and as a coach is, yeah, of course you have to aim for the best, and but also accept that you cannot have everything under control, and then also yeah, like I said, being empathic and understand the role of a player, because sometimes I think we see them too much. Yeah, these are the guys, and we just have to prepare them as good as possible. But there is also the mental part. They have things going on at home, so maybe they do things or that you couldn't predict or understand. But you have to accept these are, yeah, they are also humans, and yeah, they have also their own problems, and try to understand it and act in a way to support them as good as possible. And of course, yeah, speak their language, and try to speak the language and get their attention with it, and then get them on the yeah, on the journey, and try to help them as good as possible in, yeah, on that. And then for yeah,
Yeah,
for
I
the
was
player,
just going to say
yeah,
then, because from a player's point of view, you're in a great position because you're working with some unbelievably talented players. So it'd be really interesting, this one from your perspective at the moment, some world-class individuals. Is there any sort of traits or characteristics that you see as like common between them?
some common, but also, yeah, you see that also there, that and the various way to roams in approach of players, which and then you think, yeah, is this, in the beginning you think, also very naive, this should be the best way, it should be like this, but maybe for some players a more relaxed approach is what they need. So yeah, that's what I learned as well. There are different approaches, but some can be really focused, while some need their yeah, the relaxation, the very relaxed environment, and they're performing it at the same time, while yeah, I would have thought, oh no, this is the best approach. So that's something I accepted as well, and that's, yeah, probably also, yeah, we all have different characters, but yeah, in the end, they take care of their body. They all these things, yeah, the typical things is what they do. Maybe in football it could sometimes be, maybe be even better, but yeah, that's the comparison I made in the beginning with triathlon, where every centimeter, every second counts. But yeah, maybe in football, yeah, if you would approach it in that way, that could for some players be better, but maybe also for others not so. Yeah, it's a good question, because it makes me think. But it's yeah, you see, I think also there are different ways to roam, and maybe some approach for one player. It's also possible that if he took another approach, he would play and perform even better. But that it's I think I always have to think. That's maybe also another guy for to put on the biggest influences. But I heard, I think it was James Alone talking about Darren Burgess about Suarez, and they did a screening, and that they found a lot of things that yeah, an imbalance or this. Maybe I'm making up the I change the story. So sorry, James or Darren, if I'm not telling it right. But yeah, what's still in what I remember is that there were a lot of things that apparently were maybe not good, like in imbalances. But yeah, he was scoring goals, and he wasn't injured. He was performing. So yeah, if that's the case, yeah, do we want to change that or not? Yeah, it's possible that he's performing better, but also it's possible that then the injuries or bad performances come. So that's an interesting part. So yeah, probably also that mental part, maybe in the future we can look into it a little bit more, and yeah, that's some, yeah, as you see, that's maybe what I think about a lot. Is a lot of things still to discover, and that makes it so interesting.
Well, that's the whole point of why we do what we do, isn't it? Because we don't have all the questions, and there is constant work to be done. But yeah, Darren told some great stories on the podcast, and I'm hoping to get him on again soon, because I know he's got some fantastic insights. But also for yourself, thank you very much for giving up your time today, Arne, because there's been some amazing stuff that you've covered there. A really fascinating insight in between the different worlds of club and international football, and you've covered absolutely loads of information. So a big thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, you it was it's a lot of fun. So thank you as well, Ben. Thank you.
No problem. I was just going to ask finally, if people want to get in touch, if they want to read your research, if they want to reach out and ask any questions, where would you direct them?
But yeah, if you always can send an email to what one? I would say yes. I will provide the information with Jaspers Arne at hotmail.com if they have any questions or yeah, whatsoever. Let me know, and then yeah, probably ResearchGate are the papers are the research papers. So feel free to have a look at that. We'll provide that as well, and then. Yeah, you can find through LinkedIn as well, but it's not that there's much information on that. But yeah, feel free to contact me. Happy to help. And as I said, I'm can learn things from everyone. So I'm happy to get in touch whoever wants that. So, yeah,
Brilliant.
Looking forward.
Awesome. Really appreciate your time and best of luck with the lads' next meetup. Is it January, February time?
March will be the next.
Okay.
March will be that's already the qualifier. So it's interesting period as well, because now this year we had to play the European Championship, but now they're postponed to I hope so next year. Let's hope that's going on. But then in March we'll already have the qualification games for the World Cup in Qatar 2022. So yeah,
Brilliant.
That's the next reunion.
Well, best of luck with the games in March, and we're recording this just before Christmas, so have an amazing Christmas.
Yeah, for you as well, and the listeners. Thank you, Ben. Have a great and a great 2021. Let's hope it's a little bit more more fun and seeing people around than in 2020.
Yeah, thank you, mate. Really appreciate your time. We'll catch up soon.
Perfect. Have a great day.